Peter Parker is an intellectual yet shy teenager who is struggling in high school, with few to no friends. Peter's life changed drastically when his parents left him at an early age. His father, Richard, gathered some important and private documents before leaving Peter for good. Ever since then, Peter has been living with his caring Aunt May and Uncle Ben. Many years later, Peter found out that his parents lost their lives in a plane crash. Peter has a crush on his classmate Gwen, but he is too afraid to profess his love for her. Gwen, one day, even steps up for Peter when he is being bullied by another classmate named Flash. Later that day, when helping Ben out in solving a flood issue in the basement, Peter finds his father's old briefcase. Inside the briefcase, Peter finds various documents and other belongings. Those also include a picture of his father and another fellow scientist. In the briefcase, Peter also finds his father's Oscorp Corporation badge and document file, which he doesn't understand. Peter tries to search for his father online, and he finds out that the man alongside his father in the photo is Kurt Connors. Both of them were researching on cross-species genetics until Richard went missing. Peter decides to pay Connors a visit at Oscorp. He pretends to be part of the internship program and sneaks his way into the headquarters. Peter is thrilled to find Gwen there as well, who is giving a tour of the entire headquarters to the new interns. Connors has an amputated arm, and he believes that the cross-species genetics research might allow humanity to regenerate the amputated or missing parts of a human body. When Connors arrives and asks a cross-species genetics-related question from the interns, Peter answers the question confidently and impresses Connors. As Peter isn't part of the internship program, he gets anxious when Connors asks who he is. Luckily for Peter, Gwen, who is aware that Peter sneaked his way into Oscorp, steps in for him. Upon asking if he is following her, Peter answers that he snuck into Oscorp only because he loves science. Instead of leaving the headquarters, Peter decides to look around the facility. He enters a special unit and is stunned to find several genetically modified spiders. What happens next will change the course of Peter's life forever. A few genetically modified spiders fall on Peter and one of them bites him in the process. Connors meets another executive of Oscorp, Roget. Connors breaks it to Roget that he still hasn't found the algorithm that is needed for his cross-species genetics. Roget tells him that the head of Oscorp, Norman Osborn, needs it as a cure for his terminal illness. Roget orders Connors to hurry up, otherwise they will lose everything. When a sleeping Peter is traveling back on a subway, he wakes up to miraculously find out that he has gained super reflexes. Peter discovers that he has gained several new abilities, like superhuman speed and strength. Peter begins to behave weirdly on the subway, and when a few thugs step forward to beat him up, Peter unintentionally beats them up using his new strengths. Peter still doesn't know how he is able to do all of this. The next morning, Peter experiences huge changes. He is not able to take control of things, as everything begins to attach to his hands, and he also experiences superhuman strength. Peter tries to figure out what was in his father's secretive document. The documents appear to have an algorithm of some sort. Peter decides to meet Connors at his home. At first, Connors ignores Peter, but when Peter tells him about his father, Connors recognizes Peter immediately and brings him inside. Connors lets Peter know that he isn't aware of where Peter's parents were going, or why they left all of a sudden, all those years ago. When asked about his cross-species genetics research, Connors tells Peter that he still needs a decay rate algorithm to complete his research. Peter asks Connors if there could be any side effects of what Connors intends to do. When told no, Peter gives him a piece of the algorithm his father worked on years ago. Connors is fascinated, to the point where he invites Peter to his office in the coming days. Later that day, in school, Peter uses his newly gained superhuman abilities to humiliate Flash at the basketball court. Ben is called to be informed of Peter's rude behavior. Ben is upset at Peter, as he believes that Peter shouldn't have behaved that rudely, regardless of how Flash has treated him in the past. Peter meets with Gwen once again and awkwardly asks Gwen out on a date. Luckily for him, Gwen agrees quickly, and Peter couldn't be more excited. Peter meets Connors, and both of them try to incorporate the algorithm into Connors' research. Miraculously, the algorithm completes Connors' research, and Connors couldn't be more proud. They develop a serum and inject it into a lab rat that also has an amputated limb. They are eager to see the results. Meanwhile, Ben is furious over the fact that Peter didn't pick up May from the subway station, as he was supposed to. When Ben tries to lecture Peter on how it is a person's obligation to do good things when they are actually capable of them, Peter gets upset over the fact that his actual father isn't present to say all those things. Peter leaves sadly, and Ben goes right after him. Peter disappears, and Ben begins to search for him in the city. At a convenience store, Peter gets into a small argument with a cashier, and just when he is about to leave, he watches a thief stealing all of the money from the cash register machine. Peter lets the thief get away in order to get back at the cashier. Had Peter known what was about to come next, maybe he would have stopped the thief in the first place. Uncle Ben gets in the way of the mugger, and he fatally shoots Ben in order to run away. Peter breaks down in tears, knowing that his beloved Uncle Ben lost his life because of Peter's poor decisions. May is heartbroken over this loss, and Peter makes it his mission to find the thief himself. Everyone at school comforts Peter over his loss, including the bully Flash. Gwen tries to comfort Peter, but Peter is determined to find the man who shot his uncle. Peter uses his newly gained powers to find the guy who took his Uncle Ben away from him. For days, Peter decides to look for the man, and he ends up fighting many thugs for the most part. Knowing he can't be looking for the murderer openly, as everyone would find out about his identity, Peter decides to make a mask that will conceal his face. Peter also creates his very own web shooters that give him the ability to swing across the city and be faster. Just like that, videos of Peter fighting in a mask go viral, and everyone starts to believe that a vigilante has decided to eradicate crime from the city. Peter ends up creating a whole new costume for himself. However, going out late at night and fighting crime makes Peter's life imbalanced. May doesn't know what Peter has become, and she fears for him, as Peter shows up home late and bruised almost every night. Connors excitedly informs Roget that he has found the algorithm, and the DNA of a lizard is being used on the lab rat to regrow its amputated limb. Roget wants to go a step ahead and wants Connors to use the serum on a human subject next. Connors is against this advice, as he believes that the serum isn't ready to be used on humans yet. Roget is planning to use the serum at a Veterans Administration hospital. Connors is disgusted by Roget's tactics and leaves. Little does Roget know, Connors takes a huge step and decides to use the serum on his amputated arm. Wanting to get closer to Peter, Gwen invites Peter over to her house for dinner. After arriving at her home, Peter learns that Gwen's father is actually the police captain, named George. After using the serum, Connors is thrilled to see that his arm has regenerated. Wanting Roget to know about this, he plans to stop him from reaching the hospital and testing the serum on several individuals. During dinner, George admits that he doesn't like a vigilante running around the city, doing the job of the police. Knowing that he is that vigilante, Peter interrupts George and says that he believes that the vigilante is actually trying to help the people of the city. Before the argument can escalate, Peter leaves dinner and Gwen follows right after him. Upon being asked why he cares so much about the vigilante, Peter intentionally reveals to Gwen that it's him. Gwen is shocked by this revelation, and Peter uses the moment to make out with her. On the other hand, Connor's health starts to deteriorate, to the point where he begins to notice changes in his body. Things take a huge turn when Connors actually turns into a humanoid reptile. Connors becomes extremely violent in this shape and begins to cause havoc on the bridge. Luckily for Roget, Peter arrives and catches the car with his web shooter. Connors throws more cars off the bridge, and Peter miraculously saves all of them. He is able to save a young child from falling into the river and reunites that child with his father. Upon being asked his name by that child's father, Peter calls himself Spider-Man. Connors comes back to his usual form and begins living in sewers. For the next week, Connors acts irate and begins avoiding Peter. Peter still doesn't know that Connors was the one who turned into the gigantic reptile. Peter hopes to find the humanoid reptile, and after doing a little research, he infers that the gigantic lizard might be living in the sewers. In the sewer, Connors tests the serum on himself again, and Spider-Man arrives there as well. Connors turns into a reptile and finds Spider-Man in the sewer. He starts beating him up, but Spider-Man leaves in time. However, Connors finds Peter's camera in the sewer and infers that Peter is Spider-Man. Connors begins to doubt his research and experiment, but at this point, he has gone absolutely berserk. He believes that this is the next step in eradicating human weakness. Connors thinks that this is evolution, and one has to go through this in order to adapt to survive. Connors uses the serum again to turn into the reptile. He heads to Peter's school to attack him. Peter quickly changes into Spider-Man and chases Connors outside. Peter chases Connors into the sewers and learns that Connors is planning to spread the serum throughout the city using Oscorp's technology. In that manner, everyone in the city would turn into gigantic reptiles. Peter acquires the help of Gwen and asks her to access the antidote from Oscorp and bring it to him. Meanwhile, George and the rest of the armed forces head out to stop Spider-Man and Connors. Some of the armed forces stop Connors, but Connors quickly recovers and uses the serum on the armed forces, making them turn into reptiles as well. The armed forces shoot down Spider-Man, and when George uses this moment to take off Spider-Man's mask, he is stunned to find out that Peter is in fact Spider-Man. Peter pleads with George to let him go, as he has to stop Connors from doing something drastic. George does, but Peter is unable to move because of the shots fired at him. But Peter's past heroic acts will now act as a blessing for him. The father of the child Peter saved the other day watches the news and sees the state Spider-Man is in. He directs most of the crane operators in the city to position the crane in such a manner that will allow Spider-Man to swing his way to Oscorp. Peter successfully does, and Gwen takes the antidote without Connors finding her. Before Gwen can give the antidote to Peter, George arrives and takes matters into his own hands. Connors intends to use Oscorp's technology to release a chemical cloud that would turn every individual in the city into a reptile. Peter arrives just in time to stop him. George arrives with the antidote as well and begins shooting at Connors. However, Connor fatally injures George. Before he can release the cloud, Peter switches Connor's serum with the antidote and an antidote chemical cloud is released instead. Connors and the others who were turned into reptiles start to come back to their original self. Before he takes his final breaths, George tells Peter that the city needs Spider-Man, but Peter will be making new enemies in the process. He requests Peter to keep Gwen out of this, as it would risk her life too. Peter promises George, and George passes away in his arms. After her father's funeral, Gwen is bothered that Peter has been ignoring her, but Peter can't meet up with Gwen after what her father asked Peter to do. Peter listens to his Uncle Ben's voice recording that Ben sent him before he passed. Uncle Ben lets Peter know that he is destined for greatness. Peter will become a man people will look up to. Peter eventually breaks his promise and reunites with Gwen, knowing he can't leave her, as both of them have feelings for each other. Peter carries on being Spider-Man and continues fighting injustice and crime.